Everyone, welcome. BRK 3148, yes, the last session of the day. I'm glad you guys are here. There's so many sessions to choose from, and it's Friday, lunchtime. Do my best to bring content that is relevant to what you do on your daily activities. My name is Ricardo. I'm a program manager on the Azure Stack team. And today I'm going to walk you through what it takes to build a hybrid application that uses the best out of Azure Stack and Azure. We could rename this session to how the demos of Mark Rusonovich and Jeffrey keynote were built. Because I'm going to walk through those demos. And I will click down a little bit more in details. With that said, some of the content that I'm going to share with you, you may have seen in other sessions. But my intent is to give you more details, exactly what is going on under the covers. The way I framed the session, I have a few slides to introduce what is hybrid, why hybrid is important, and then we'll go through demos. All right, very simple agenda. But at the end of the session, I'll give you insight that really can help you make those hybrid applications a reality. So Azure is everywhere. An extensive set of geographic locations. Azure has many certifications. And there's no question about the value and the power of the public cloud, how we can use that for scalability, elasticity, and et cetera. But in certain scenarios, you cannot go to the public cloud. You need your resources in your data center. Certain scenarios also can be better addressed if you build solutions that span both the private and the public cloud. Also, it's very important to highlight that when I talk about Azure Stack, I mean, all this session will be Azure Stack, resources in Azure Stack and resources in Azure. But there are different Azure clouds available. There is public Azure, there is Azure for government, and there are regions of Azure for certain geographies. And a lot of those learnings that I'm going to share with you are applicable to those as well. So sometimes business requirements mandate that you keep data, that you keep your process close to the data, or regulations require you to store or compute information in your data center. Sometimes you have existing resources that could help you to build an application, and you just need a way to reuse those resources. And that's the key of designing hybrid applications, is reuse what you have best on the different locations. Some hybrid scenarios, these are not the only hybrid scenarios, but those are scenarios that we hear about our customers very frequently. Sometimes latency is an issue for customers if they are not close to an Azure region. Regulation, big thing. Customers face regulations that require that their compute and data are stored in close to their data centers. There is also disconnected scenarios we talk about with many customers where they say that they love to operate and design for the cloud, but they need to run in a ship or in a geographic location that is no connectivity. But still, even under those constraints of a disconnected environment, they realize the value of operating how they operate on the public cloud. Or if any of you attended the session that was prior to this one on DevOps and Azure Stack that Matt, Anjay, and Sri that are here in the audience, they presented, hey, you want to adopt the same model, even on a disconnected scenario. That's where Azure Stack comes into place. There's no doubt about the transformation of IT. And more, what we see is trends like shadow IT happening, where if IT doesn't provide the infrastructure that the people that are developing the apps need, they will leverage the public cloud. Also, there is a very massive pressure on the responsibility of the people that provide the IT operations. Because more and more our customers require that apps and solutions are designed with a very short time span. And finally, developers building apps, they are looking at agile methodologies that allow them to build those apps in a way that they can address the business requirements, keeping the time to value very short. Coupled to that, there is a slide that most of you had seen over the week, which highlights how extensive the Azure reach is. Multiple regions of Azure, hundreds of service providers, and a considerable number of enterprises that are part of this ecosystem. So really, when we talk about Azure, this is an entire ecosystem that if you are designing your apps that leverage this ecosystem, it's very likely that someone solved the same problems that you are solving, that you can leverage existing things, and at the end of the day, you can be more productive and design and focus on solving the problems of your internal or external customers and not solving, dealing with technical issues, right? Because at the end of the day, your apps need to solve what? The needs of the business, the needs of the people that actually end up using your services. Now, when we talk about hybrid, one thing that is important to highlight in the context of Azure and Azure Stack is if you look at applications that consume Azure, there is a very extensive set of resources for those applications to consume. There is also a common set of templates and development tools which enables you to operate the life cycle of your application. And those things exist for both Azure and Azure Stack. And that's the consistency. So we usually refer to consistency being one of the key, the first value prop of Azure Stack. Because basically we have the operations of your application, all the life cycle and the tools that enable you to do that, plus a set of experiences that range from a portal for end users and administrators to perform operations through a common set of scripts and development languages. All this is common and shared against the entire Azure ecosystem. So when you are talking about hybrid, we are really talking about plugging in your app to this very powerful ecosystem. All right, so this is a slide that you also saw in other presentations. And the beauty of that is Azure provides you a consistent set of experiences that are the same, no matter if you are connected to the public cloud or the private cloud with Azure Stack or one of the geographic clouds and the government clouds. Also, a unified model to define and develop your operations. And Mark had presented on developing ARM templates early today. And that was a great session covering that topic. A set of existing services for your applications to rely on. And the platform foundation services, software-defined storage, software-defined networking, and compute. Now, what is also interesting is that you have a marketplace that comes from both Microsoft and from the ecosystem. And actually, that's something that I'm going to show in one of my demos, where how do you start? If you want to create a new set of services and you don't have that resources, you don't want to spend time in developing that, how do you do that relying on the marketplace? All right. So why you want to do that? And that's the question that a lot of people think. I love the concept of the public cloud. What are the reasons to think hybrid? Oh, well, hybrid and Azure Stack enables you new types of applications. You may have an industrial plant where connectivity is limited. And as I mentioned earlier, you want to reuse the same model of operation that you have for the public cloud. Mobile. We've been talking with different customers that bring new scenarios to Azure Stack where if you are only thinking on the cloud, maybe regulations could stop you. And being able to do hybrid would enable you to address those aspects, for example. Global enterprises. I've been talking with customers, a great example on the auto manufacturing, where they have plants all over the world, and they are current users of Azure. But some of the plants require data to be stored on site. That's a great example of hybrid as well. And finally, all these scenarios where we need to bring the processing close to a multitude of devices. And smart city, IoT is a great example of that. So these are the reason why. The reason why is when only one cloud won't do it and you need to connect the different clouds together, that's when you think about hybrid. So what is a hybrid app? There are different ways to categorize an app as hybrid. And I'm going to show you some examples. You guys ready for this? All right. I had 85 slides as an introduction, but I guess that the demo would be better. All right. So I cannot talk about hybrid without highlighting consistency. Okay? So the first example I have is a very, very simple example. The example is this. I have an existing app, and I'm using the term app very loosely. Okay? This app is comprised of a VM. In this case, a Windows VM. And this VM has some kind of application running it. Okay? All right. So I want to be able to deploy the same app. First of all, I will start with Azure. I want to deploy this app in Azure. All right? A week from now, someone comes to me and says, Ricardo, you know what? Now I need this app in my data center. Right? Typically, what we would usually do, oh, well, it's a simple app. I'm going to recreate it. Right? So you recreate, in this case, the VM, reconfigure. Right. Later, someone else comes and now asks me to redeploy the same app somewhere else. What do? What I would typically do, I would go and redeploy that app. And doing this process over and over. This is a prone for error process, and also it's a process that doesn't scale. So let's start with this. I have a simple app. In this case, it's a VM. It could be something else. Okay? Again, I'm using the app as a very loosely term. And I like to deploy that app in different clouds with the same template and the same code. I'm not going into the details what a template is. Mark covered that on his session. So I highly recommend you checking that out. And I'll have the links for the session in the appendix of these slides. All right. So a couple of things here. This is Azure Stack. If I go to my resource groups, I have a couple of resource groups in my account. More specifically, I have 3 resource groups. And I go to Azure. This is Azure. Oh, well, you are looking at how much money I have on my account. This is what it takes to be brave, right? This is my demo, my account in Azure. I need to be quick on this demo. I may run out of credits. Just kidding. All right. So, and I have a bunch of resource groups here. I'm just showing you this so you see what I have deployed in Azure. All right. PowerShell. And let's bring a script that I created early. And what this script does is it uses the Azure SDK. And note that I said the word Azure SDK, not the Azure Stack SDK. It's the Azure SDK, same API, same SDK. And it takes an existing template and deploys this template against a subscription. Okay? All right. If you look at and the way we are going to run this, we are going to run this step by step. So I'm going to launch another PowerShell tab here. And I'm going to open the same code. So just to make it clear what I'm doing here, I have 2 tabs, same script. And I'm going to run parts of this script in one window and parts of this script in another window. The reason I want to do that is just I want to do step by step so you can actually see what's going on. So first task, what is the first task that we had? The first task was to deploy that app that is defined on a template against Azure. Okay? So let's do that. All right, if you look at my code here, you see that I have a couple of regions on the code. So one is called Azure Environment, and the other is Azure Stack Environment, and then region deploy. So the idea is the deployment calls are exactly the same for both environments, but of course I use different credentials for those environments. So what I will do is I will run the set of, lines that authenticate against Azure. And for those of you that are familiar with the Azure SDK, this is just pure Azure PowerShell SDK. So let's run this step by step. What's going to happen, I'll be prompted for credentials. And by the way, for a non-interactive process, there are ways to not be prompted for a password. In this case of the demo, I'm being prompted for the password just so I can show you that we are indeed connecting to that region of Azure. So I'm going to authenticate with my live ID. No, I won't give you my password. And even if I gave, with $26 on my account, you would not do much, right? All right, so let me sign in. And what's going to happen on the left side of the screen, we will see PowerShell reporting that we are connected to Azure Cloud. All right? OK, Azure Cloud with the credentials I provided. All right, so now what we will do is I'm going to skip that region of code that provides the credentials and the endpoints for Azure Stack. I will highlight my deployment code. And this is a pretty straightforward deployment code. It just creates a new resource group and deploys a JSON template. So let me run this. And now I can see that a new resource group was created. And the name of the resource group is HYB RG370. And if I switch to my Azure portal, go to the resource groups. Let me refresh this. We should see that resource group that was just created. And the status should show creating. Here, we have HYB RG370. All right, and I have a VM, a VNIC. I won't go into the details. All right, let's leave that code running, and let's switch to PowerShell again. And we'll do something slightly different. You notice how I switch to a different PowerShell tab. I'm going to collapse the region that I used to authenticate against Azure. And now what I will do is I will select the code that that authenticates me against Azure Stack. And for those of you that were paying attention to my screen and count all the lines I selected in the prior example, you may be wondering why the line count is different. And the line count is different because of the endpoints, right? If you look closely, we have local endpoints that point to the Azure Stack deployment. All right, so what happened is you can look at the left side of the screen. I'm connected to the environment Azure Stack. All right? And now what I will do is I will start this deployment. Again, it's the same deployment code. A new resource group was created. The name is HYB RG190. And if I go to Azure Stack, I should have a new resource group, 190. And that resource group contains exactly the same objects because the resource group was built from the same template. All right? So what we accomplish here, we have one app that I can deploy in the environment I choose with the same script, the same template. Now, this is one example of one type of hybrid where you design your resources and then you target the different environments. Now, let's evolve this a little bit. And for that, I will use another example, which is the same demo that we show on Jeffrey's and Mark's keynote. Here's the scenario. I am a retailer which historically has brick and mortar shops. And now I'm expanding to the online retail business. But I also have my financial backend systems running on-prem. How do I make these two talk with each other, right? So let's evolve this. Let's evolve the prior demo to this model. All right, first thing, let's start with Azure. Why? Oh, well, for my web frontend, I want to leverage the scale, elasticity, and the presence of Azure all over. But I also don't want to develop something new. I'm not a specialist in e-commerce. I don't want to develop an e-commerce solution from scratch. So what do? Remember my slides on the ecosystem? Yeah, we will leverage the ecosystem. So I want an e-commerce solution. So I go to the Azure Marketplace, select e-commerce, and I will have many options to choose from. For this particular demo, we had chose Spree. So Spree is an e-commerce platform, and what the marketplace provides me is a pre-built image. The store will be up and running with a few clicks. So select the marketplace item, click Create, provide some customization information for that particular item, and you create a resource. I had to create this resource ahead of time, so let's look at what this marketplace item gives to us. So if I scroll all the way down here, there is a resource group called Spree, and that resource group has a VM, a network security group, IP, etc. And if I look at the IP address of that resource group, of that VM, here, 407821.14. So what this means is, let me organize my windows here, kind of cramped. I can grab this IP, paste on the browser, and here's my e-commerce website, which, by the way, is live. Feel free to buy some stuff if you want to. That's the power of the marketplace. And this is hybrid. Hybrid is also knowing that you don't need to create everything from scratch, okay? You can leverage the ecosystem of Azure. All right, so this is part of our, it's solution to part of our problems, right? All right, let's leave this website for a moment here. Now, how about the on-prem? So let's go to Azure Stack. And again, the idea is I'm walking you through how we had built that demo with the different components. This is all pre-deployed, so we save some time on the demos. It's interesting. On my Azure Stack instance, I have a resource group called Oracle, and that resource group has a VM on it. You know what? Let's take a look at what is inside this VM. So let's see. I have a remote desktop connection already set. You can see on the left side of my screen. And IP address is a private IP, 192.168.102, which is the same that was being reported on Azure Stack. So this is actually the IP of that VM on the resource group. And if we look at this, I have a couple of things here. I have a service that is running and waiting for data from Azure. And I have an instance of Oracle that basically this service reads from a Azure queue and stores the transaction in Oracle. Actually, let's look at the data. That is stored on this database pretty quick. All right. So the idea here is my service will be waiting for orders from my front-end website, and it will record that order data in my backend database. So what we are seeing here is a bunch of existing orders. And I'm just showing this. So as we place a new order, the order will show up here. And I'll walk you through all the hoops to do this. So first thing is, this VM had to be deployed. It was deployed using a template, right? And then this VM had to be customized. And the way to customize that, which is install the service and configuring everything, is achieved through a custom script extension, which is something that customizes the VM. So with that, I have an automated way to deploy my front end through a marketplace item in Azure. And this is all templatized. And my on-prem resources are also templatized and deployed in Azure Stack. Now, the question you may have is how this connectivity happens. But before I go and answer that question, let's buy something in the store to see if indeed it works. So I have most of my coworkers in the front row. So I'm going to buy something for they have to put up with me. So you know what? Let's buy a Ruby on Rails jersey. Yes, I'm not that friend of yours. Like I'm kind of friend. Now I go to check out and save and continue. And before I place the order, we'll stop here, OK? Because there's one thing missing, and I'm glad that I did not move forward. You guys saw the back end. You saw the Oracle database and the number of orders. You saw the front end. But you did not saw what is in the middle, right? All right. So I have a couple of SSH screens here. OK? What you are looking at is an SSH screen into the Spree website. So I won't go into details of that particular marketplace item. But when you create that store front end, it actually deploys Spree on a Linux VM and all the requirements for that e-commerce solution. So what happened is, based on that, I create a service on the Spree side that listens for the orders and write to Azure queues. Okay? So what you are seeing is a Python script running in Linux that wait for the orders, write to Azure queues. And on the other side, that service I show you on the Oracle VM is listening to the same queue. Make sense? Great. So let's finally buy this shirt. All right, transaction was completed. What happens is on the Spree VM, we see a message on the bottom inserting new record with ID XYZ. And on the Oracle side, the Oracle VM side, you saw the service running. There is a message saying inserting order for record number. All right. So remember when I first brought the orders page, we had 20 orders. So I will refresh this screen. And now I have 21 orders. And here's the order we just inserted. Okay? That's exactly what we bought on the website. And if one of you makes any purchases now, they will show up in the same database. But this is a deep dive, so let's take a look even further, because there are some concepts here that I think that are very valuable. So the first thing is I'm going to stop the service that listens for orders. Stop that, because I want you to see the data flow. All right? Okay. So how do you connect the both? There are different ways. I cannot show every single way possible in a 45-minute session, but I will show you some ways. All right, so for that, what we'll do is let's buy something else. And I'm going to buy one item only. Same thing. But remember what I did. I stopped the data flow on the Azure Stack side. To check. Save and continue. I have another order. If I look at my web front-end output, I see that a new order was placed. Let's go back on-prem. And what I want to do is I will bring something on the screen, which is Azure Storage Explorer. So Azure Storage Explorer, it's a free tool that enables you to look up into Azure storage accounts. I do have a storage account here. Let me refresh this storage account. You see that now I have a record here. This is exactly the order data as it was written to the Azure queue by the web frontend. If I enable on the other side the receiving service, that message will walk out of the queue and will be processed. All right, so that's one example, right? And hybrid is about this. You will be able to place the resources where they make more sense. And there are plenty of options to enable the connectivity. But everything is templatized. You can leverage all the deployment mechanisms that you are already familiar if using Azure. And with that, you can create applications that spans the different clouds. Let's look at some other things that you need to consider. So how do you manage and operate a solution like that? Right? Because one thing is building. Now, how do you look at the different resources that a hybrid solution have on Azure and Azure Stack? And also, how do you, when you run if you are doing like PowerShell code, how do you authenticate to get into Azure and Azure Stack? So I'm going to show you a little bit more details on how you operate and the life cycle of those type of solutions. So for that, I want to show you something, another set of resources. And actually, before I move forward, another thing that is important to highlight on hybrid applications is the very extensive set of APIs and SDKs available. So this is actually the code that reads stored data, reads the web front-end data and writes to queue. This is Python and uses something called Azure Storage.queue. So the SDK is available for virtually, for most of the development tools and frameworks. So that's something that highlights the fact that you can leverage existing resources to make use of your hybrid applications. All right, so let's look at which resource groups I have in Azure and which resource groups I have in Azure Stack. I have another resource group here, and it's called Bletchley, which is the blockchain demo. And I won't go into the details of the actual blockchain demo for now, but I want you to take a look at the resources I have here. So I have a set of VMs and load balancer, NICs, and this is running in Azure Stack. And if I switch to Azure, and go to my resource groups, I have exactly the same resource group with those resources. Because that deployment originated from the same template. And the reason we had two deployments of the same type of resources is this showcases a financial institution maintaining their own blockchain infrastructure in Azure, and due to regulation, they may be required in some countries to have this locally. So they deploy exactly the same template. But going to my original question, how do you manage this? And I like to give you some examples. So I'm a PowerShell, a heavy user of PowerShell. So from a PowerShell perspective, how can I look at all my resources no matter where they are? So let me open this existing PowerShell code here. All right, so file, hybrid management demo. Cool. So let's walk through this. Or before walking through this, let me run this code. And we will investigate the output. All right, so I'm seeing different authentication of different resources. And a script just ran. Let's look at the output. So one single script, and I'm looking at my resources that are residing both in Azure Stack and in Azure. How did I accomplish that? So let's look at this script. So if you look at how this script is structured is very similar to what I showed on the prior demo. I have different regions here. And one region has the private endpoint for Azure Stack. And the other region has the private endpoints to Azure. But also, one thing that is important to highlight is, for those of you that were looking very close to my code on the prior demo, you'll notice that I had some usernames hard-coded and passwords. Don't do that. Never. And if you ever tell that Ricardo from the Azure Stack team did that on his demo, I will deny until my death. Okay? Okay. How do you handle this? Use service principals. So bottom line is, I won't go into the details of what service principals are, but if you are developing to Azure Stack and Azure and you have an automated process, I highly recommend you leverage service principals. The idea is, if you look at this code now, it doesn't have usernames and passwords. It has what we call client IDs and secrets, but they are not regular credentials. They are service principals. So the service principal can expire, and also my account has specific RBAC roles that only give a set of access to that service principal. And also service principal can use certificates. So what I do is, I have the same regions, I specify the service principals, and then I save this profile. So if you look at my code, I have a call to save Azure RM profile. Then, when time comes to actually perform whatever management capability I like to perform, what I do is, I just select an existing profile, I select the subscription, and then I execute the command. And this is the beauty of having a consistent set of experiences, as I mentioned earlier. It's one SDK, is the Azure PowerShell SDK. And the difference between public Azure and Azure Stack are the endpoints. Okay? All right. So with that said, let's look at what we saw so far. We started with a very simple hybrid app. We deploy that app using the same PowerShell script and the same template. Then we evolved to an application that part of the application was on the public cloud, and part of the application was on the private cloud. And then we evolved that scenario. If I want to query my resources, how do I do that, right? And we did that from PowerShell. I could do the same from CLI as well. So to wrap everything up, another way you can glue everything together from a development and lifecycle experience, you could use something like Visual Studio. By the way, Visual Studio is not the only tool. We do support Visual Studio Code and others. But this is one example how I have a single view of my entire application. So what you are looking at is a Visual Studio project that has the web front end and the financial back end on the same project. All my ARM templates there. I can also leverage Cloud Explorer to retrieve resources from multiple subscriptions that I have, no matter if that subscription is in Azure or if that subscription is in Azure Stack. So as you can see on the credential picker, I have my live ID. So from one single place, I can query my resources no matter where they are. Not only that, if I like to perform a deployment because one of my resources needs to be recreated, or I need to scale those resources, I can command that deployment either from PowerShell, CLI, or I can just right-click, choose deploy, new. I will choose which account and subscription I like to use, which resource group, if it's a new or existing. I can have parameters for this deployment, and I can either choose to validate my template or go ahead and deploy. So hybrid has many meanings. We really just touch on some of the meanings. The main takeaway I like you to walk out of this session with is there is a huge ecosystem in Azure that you can leverage. There is consistency between Azure and Azure Stack, which allows you to develop and operate in the same way. So take that on your advantage. And then it's a matter of choosing the location that best fits that particular part of your application. With that said, I'm out of time. And first of all, I'll take a question here. But I like to say thank you because you guys stay on a Friday at lunchtime. This is big for me. Thank you. There is one question over there.
How do you deploy the solution as a whole?
So how do you deploy this solution as a whole for the two clouds? There are many ways you can accomplish that. You can, for example, if you are doing this in an automated way in PowerShell, you can just call multiple template deployments and then point to the different locations, pretty much the same way that I did when I was retrieving the VM information. Specifically on Visual Studio, you can deploy project by project, but you can also do a build script that will basically perform multiple deployments from inside Visual Studio. That's possible as well. Any other questions? All right, if there are no more questions, thank you so much. I will stay around for a little bit. You have safe travels back home. See you in Ignite next year, okay? Thank you so much.